and welcome to a very special edition of the Trans in the City podcast. This week we're celebrating Genderfluid Visibility Week. I'm Victoria Rowland, Student Liaison Manager at Trans in the City, and today I am beyond thrilled to have an incredibly inspiring guest with us, Pips Bunce. Pips is not only a strong supporter of Trans in the City, but one of my best friends and somebody that I value almost as a sister. For those that don't know, Pips is an award-winning advocate for inclusion and diversity, particularly in the LGBTQ space. Pips, there is literally so much that I could say about you, all positive things, of course. Can I ask you to give us the lowdown on your profile, please? Maybe starting from your professional outlook.
Okay, thank you so very much, Vicky. And honestly, it's a pleasure and an honour to be here. I'm really, really thrilled by this. And thank you so much for everyone making us so comfortable. So, as you said, my name is Pips Bunce, pronouns she, her and they. I guess from a professional perspective, I've been working in primarily financial services for over 32 years now across a range of different firms.
You're not that old, surely.
Thank you. I found a time machine, but that's from Credit Suisse, UBS, Bank of England, Goldman Sachs, a range of those firms, and British Telecom Research and a few others. So always in very senior leadership positions, with a real focus on fintech, on technology, obviously. Technology has changed over the years, so much more focused now on AI and a range of things like that. But I think parallel to that as well, I've been incredibly involved in much advocacy, diversity, equity and inclusion work, which I think we're going to touch on later. I think as part of that, I'm very proud to engage with a lot of other groups and firms as well as part of my advocacy work. So whether that's speaking in Parliament, whether it's working with the Government Equalities Office, and certainly through my own company now, Humility Hub, and several other lines of work. I've worked with hundreds of different leading major global firms, really just trying to help people, firms, groups progress on their journey of diversity, equity and inclusion, and fostering that open and sense of belonging across their companies and across their firms globally. So I think from a professional perspective, I've been very privileged to have a role that allows me to affect change and to make a real positive difference, which, is what drives my heart to do more, I think.
Yeah, I feel like there's a whole other podcast here around tech and AI space, but watch this space. Dare I ask, with all that sort of in your life from a professional perspective, have you got any extracurricular activities? Do you get any time for you?
I certainly always try to make time for me and, certainly for my loved ones and family. So, I spend a lot of time. I've been married to my lovely wife for 31 years now. We've been blessed with two amazing children that are now 26 and 23. So obviously lots of time with them. I'm an appointed leadership fellow at Windsor Castle, which, is a big privilege to me. I guess I've done a lot of other work, whether that's an ambassador for the United Nations. I've done work with several boards that I'm on, some charity groups, leadership committees, and across the different sectors. So one's a LGBT mental health charity and other ones focus on a different sector. So I think all of these things, really drive my passion. They always, they are things I want to do. I want to find the time to do them. I think time for me definitely is a commodity that is one of the scarcest ones, but I do try to balance things as best I can when I can.
Well, we know this because our drinks and dinner date has been a long time coming, hasn't it? We don't quite have the time like we used to, sadly. Lastly, you're always up for an award or a nomination. I lose track. What are the awards and nominations that you're most proud of?
That's a really tricky one because I think, and I know it sounds blasé, etc., but I think all of those awards are so very important to me because I think for me it's not so much about a particular award, it's more about the visibility and representation that those awards mean. Because for me, when I came out, I remember feeling like the only, looking around, there was no one else that looked similar to my identity, and I know what that feels like. So for me, any of those awards that gives visibility to a different part of the identity or to a different part of the community, really powerful. I think, I'm proud of all of them, whether it's the Involve Outstanding Executive Leader, whether it's the British LGBT Awards, whether it's the European Diversity Awards, whether it's sitting alongside Steve Cook in the top 7 LGBT pioneers in fintech. I'm proud of all of them for different reasons, but I think the driving fundamental factor is really, I know the difference that it makes. I have children at school, as an example, reaching out, sharing with me the difference that it makes to them, seeing role models like myself, and that always makes me cringe, feeling like I'm a role model, but that makes such a difference to me because for me, that's part of the legacy that I want to leave behind. I want to leave this world a better place, a more open and inclusive and accepting place. And, I know the difference that makes. So I think the awards are lovely. The galas and parties, absolutely great fun, as we know. but fundamentally, I know the difference they make to the wider community. And quite often those that are less visible, it makes a big difference.
And hearing just how authentic and passionate you are about it. The very fact that all of this encompasses under your extracurricular activities and things you like to do in your spare time speaks absolute volumes. So I'm super proud of you. It really is an honour to have Pips here, but we're going to dive right in now and ask you a few questions. Promise nothing too taxing. As I said, Trans in the City is proudly celebrating Genderfluid Visibility Week this week. For those of us in the audience who are just starting our learning journey and those who are aspiring allies, perhaps, could you please explain what it means to you to be gender fluid? And I say to you because I know that this can mean different things to different people. So what is it to you?
That's a really important point you touch on there, and I think a really good question, because I think everyone in the world of inclusion and diversity, and particularly when we're talking about different identities, it's new to some people, other people are much more versed in this. So I think for me, being gender fluid is part of, effectively it's anyone that is fluid in either their identity or their expression. So, they may not identify as the conventional male or female. There might be a mixture of both. There might be somewhere in between. They might be sliding on that scale. But equally, it's not just identity. It can also be expression. So it's if someone feels like they don't stick with society's more traditional conventions of how someone of a particular gender identity would express. So it's more about your expression to the outside world. I think because there's so many different identities, now obviously gender fluid and for me non-binary are one of many, many, many. It can be quite confusing to people, particularly like you say, Vicky, to those that are new to some of these different identities and topics. I think the whole wider universe of gender expansive identities, there's 50, 100 different subtypes of identity. But I think something that I always refer back to is the genderbread person, because that simplifies the whole concept. It breaks down gender identity to gender expression to sexuality to biological sex. Different constructs, you can't assume one from the other, and each of these can often be a sliding scale. So I think for me, fluidity is more, I am gender fluid in my expression. I don't know how I'm going to express until I wake on a given day. Sometimes it may be more masculine, other days more feminine, other days androgynous in the middle, whatever. But I don't know until the time. And, I've been like that for a long time. For me, I probably knew I was gender fluid or non-binary from about 4 years old. Obviously, language is an amazing thing. It's constantly evolving. I certainly didn't know those terms back then. It took me a long time to feel like I knew which bucket I fitted into. And it took me a while to, be curious and understand before I felt what I aligned with. I think as Apostle said, I think wisdom comes, or the beginning of wisdom is from knowing yourself. And I think it's so important to really explore and be curious and understand how you personally identify. And for me, gender identity and gender expression is a really important thing. And I think when it comes to coming out, knowing that there's people around you, knowing that there are allies that are supportive, that want to understand, that are not going to mock, that are not going to bully or banter, is really, really important. So I think the more people that can step up and understand some of the different nuances of some of the different identities and some of the perhaps the challenges that people from that sub-community may have to go through is really important, because that allows them people to be much more powerful and effective allies in supporting that pillar. So I think, it's also conformancy. I think people that don't necessarily feel like they conform to society's expectations, some of those might consider themselves non-binary or gender fluid or gender expansive. There's so many different labels. I think if you look on Facebook, there's over 75 different ways someone can identify. And it's constantly changing, like you say.
You said it could be confusing for people who are aspiring to be allies. What advice would you give to these people that want to learn more? Because there's definitely do's and don'ts when it comes to doing your own research and not relying on the trans and non-binary community to give you all the information, right?
And definitely don't rely on the media, right? Because there are some parts of the media that will just spin a very, quite often negative narrative when it comes to some of these topics. So, absolutely. Reach out to the community, reach out to people, reach out to groups like Trans in the City or groups like that, where at least they are going to be giving you and providing you solid, accurate, factual information. Because I think the more you can understand about a particular identity and the challenges they've faced, the better you can step up and support. And I think even at the personal level, doing simple things like check to respect, checking someone's pronouns. If you're not sure, it's much better to ask rather than assume it and make a mistake and potentially make someone feel very bad. So I think things like that are really important. So yeah, step up, get involved, and learn through the lived experience of others, because that is such a powerful way to actually learn about perhaps a different lived experience or thing or group or person that you may not have been exposed to.
Yeah, I mean, look, you amaze me all the time, you know this, but you've got such a powerful voice for the trans and non-binary community. Can you tell us, particularly from a corporate aspect, why is inclusion in the workplace so important?
It's a good one, and absolutely so very important. I think there's so many different dimensions as to why it's important. I personally find, I think, you know, being that only one in a workplace, in a group, in a team is an incredibly scary place to be. You know, I certainly felt that myself before I came out. I was working, you know, on the trading floor, stock markets, financial services, and, you know, certainly 10, 15 years back wasn't always deemed the most inclusive space to be in. So I think I know how scary it can be. And I think having that safety net of allyship and people around you that are empathetic, that are supportive, that are compassionate, that are there to support and help you, even if you may be different to perhaps how they are, makes such a big difference. So I think, you know, having that environment where people can be the best versions of themselves and be truly authentic, incredibly powerful. I know when I came out myself, you know, the difference in not how I behaved, but, you know, how committed I was, the things that I was doing, how confident I was, a range of different things. It really had a fundamental impact on both how I felt, but also how other people perceived me. And it was always a big positive shift. I think having an inclusive environment, you know, until you have that in place, there's always a fear of, will you be understood and accepted by those around you in the workspace? So again, a lot of people might be covering, might not be genuine about who they are. So I think having a place where people feel the sense of belonging and they can be their authentic self, incredibly important. You know, I think community, society at large to the trans non-binary community can at places at times be hostile. So I think, you know, it's really important to have at least a work environment where people feel that they are in a safe space, that they can be their true selves, because there's enough hostility and hatred in this world. I think we don't need more of that. I think just allowing people to be their best authentic self, that's such an important thing, because it has such a fundamental impact on how people feel and also how they perform as well. And I think, you know, certainly the work I do historically, the work I'm doing now with Humility Hub and helping organisations on their journey of creating that acceptive environment, I see the positive impact it makes, not just to the individuals, not just to the staff, but what people think about the company, what people think, you know, their children, family members at the firm, etc. Yeah. It's such a transformative thing, having that environment that is inclusive, that is supportive, that does foster that sense of belonging. Because I think culture does eat strategy for breakfast. You can have the best strategy in the world for a firm, but if your culture is toxic or doesn't work or isn't looking at the right things, it's doomed.
I'm stealing that sentence.
Please do.
Obviously, you've seen the good, the bad, and the very, very ugly in employers, and we're not here to name and shame today. But I would love to know what you think employers are doing really well in this space, and perhaps on the flip side, things that you think could do with a little bit of improvement.
That's a good one. I'm totally with you. Naming shaming is it's good for some things, but not always. I mean, I think looking at the doing good side, I think let's face it, so many firms are doing so much amazing good work, and you know, it warms my heart to know that firms really care about this stuff. I think the point to call out is all these firms are quite often on the same journey, but at very different points. You know, some firms are really just starting; they've not even got an ally program up and running, let alone things focused on trans and non-binary and other forms of diversity and the challenges they face. Other people are much further progressed. So I think, you know, it's really important to note that at least even these firms that are at very different points on that journey in that race, they are trying to go towards the right direction. It always fascinates me seeing what drives a firm to want to make these changes. You know, sometimes it's the senior executive leaders and the board, other times it might be staff members, other times it might be members of the queer community, other times it might be allies. So I think having that different combination of catalysts within a firm to make the changes happen, or at least to try and hold the firm accountable to make the changes happen, is really, really interesting. And I think that's necessary. I think looking at, you know, some of the work that's being done, having firms recognising the wider set of gender expansive identities and perhaps some of the nuances that are associated to each of them, recognising different days of visibility, just, trying to educate and inform their staff and allies about the different sub-identities and what's involved and what's it like to have the lived experience as that type of person. I think that goes a long way. And I think, what can be done well, this can be healthcare, it can be restrooms, it can be policies, it can be networks, it can be fostering that sense of community coming together, it can be having groups of a particular sub-identity so people can at least speak to others from their own, perhaps, less visible identity, asexual or intersexual or whatever. All of these things are really, really important. And it's nice to see firms sort of stepping up to try and do this. I think an important thing as well is partnering with firms. So if you're reaching out to, whether it's Trans in the City or being part of Stonewall, or, standing with and standing by firms that really do help drive to make a positive difference. I think that's the firms I see progressing the most. I think looking at perhaps the ones that are not so good, I think, one of the things that frustrates me is certainly pink washing or pink hushing.
Performative allyship.
Performative
right?
allyship, right?
Yes.
Well, because it's quite obvious to see firms that are really perhaps talking the talk but not really walking the walk. Yeah. So they're really doing these things for a tick box exercise, yet you speak to some of the staff and that's not necessarily the case. That's pink washing. Pink hushing, equally. Firms, they are doing things, but they're scared to be visible and vocal about the things that they are standing by. And I think
that's pink hushing.
That's pink hushing,
right,
yeah.
okay.
And I think if you are a true ally to the community, right, you need to be doing this in good faith, in good heart, and be visible and vocal that you do stand by the community. That's important too. So I think the whole walking the walk and talking and talk, sometimes some firms are focusing on just one subset of diversity and not really looking at the wider, more holistic picture. I think that's quite often a mistake, or even one and done. We've got one trans person, we've got one gay person, we've got one this, that, the other. They think that is then the whole challenge addressed as part of their strategy, which obviously I think is not the case. And I think a big mistake quite often can be even firms with the best intention in the world. They, if you're at the start of that journey particularly, they may want to come along and do everything and almost boil the ocean. It's much better to focus on, well, actually, let's be honest. Let's forget the blame culture. Let's really address where are the biggest voids that we have. Okay, how best can we plug those voids? What do we need to put in place? Let's focus on the next 6 months, 12 months to a year and come up with very specific things, not everything, but a subset, and make sure we deliver on them well, because that makes such a huge difference. And I think it's all about, even in that case, taking small steps that will make a huge positive impact, rather than being scared of not doing enough or doing the wrong thing and then stepping back.
So doing one thing really, really well.
Yes,
and
building on
the
it.
other things.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's really good advice. Of course, this is a Trans in the City event, so it wouldn't be right without me plugging how amazing we actually are. But I know that you're a strong supporter of the work Trans in the City are doing, and you have been for many, many years. Could you tell me a little bit more about the impact you think that Trans in the City is having on the community and wider, with employers too?
Yeah, absolutely. And you are spot on there. I am so proud of Trans in the City and people like your very good self that do amazing work for them and with them. But honestly, I really see them moving the needle. I really see them stepping up and getting involved in so many organisations. I think you talk about being a supporter for a long time. It was many years ago. I remember I was speaking at an event with them. There was only 3 firms involved at the time. So it was one of the first Trans in the City events. And it's so nice to see an idea, a concept grow from, this small group of a few people getting together to try and make a difference to this massive, massive machine we now have that has many more corporate partnerships, has many more strands as to the support that they're providing. And, I like the fact that they are providing support and guidance and policies and education and all of those things, but also pushing back and calling things out when there is something that is wrong, trying to step up to address some of the other challenges that particularly the trans and the non-binary population are facing. So I think from my perspective, really, really proud of seeing so many different people, so many different firms, so many different organisations and individuals working together to drive change and drive that difference. Because again, you see the impact it has on real people's lives, seeing people step up and come out because they feel that they've connected, they feel that they've got support, they feel like there's a community. And I think, having groups like Trans in the City, it's great because they can also be that family when perhaps there's no visibility or presence within the firm that you might be working in. So you might come from a firm where there's no network, there's no group of people that are out, there's no trans or non-binary out individuals. So having another group that you can go to, you know, whether it's the same sector or not, is a really powerful thing. And I think, you know, some of the things that they're doing, like the Trans 101 training, really helping to educate individuals, firms, groups, teams about, I don't know, the identities, some of the challenges, some of the things that I was touching on earlier, the genderbread person, and what's it like to have a lived experience as that particular person. Because, you know, I can tell you, it's not always easy. You know, I would never want to be any different. I'm very proud to be trans and non-binary and gender fluid, and have been for a long, long time, as long as I can live. But it's not always easy. You know, you do face some real prejudice and bias and discrimination sometimes. So I think the more we can get out there into the community, and corporates is a really good way to do that, because generally corporates want to make the world a better place for the right reason.
Yeah.
So things like the Trans 101 training, I think the student ambassador and mentoring scheme, another really good example. You know, you can get people come along and they will be connected up quite often to very senior people from the corporate world. You know, they may be cisgender, they might be trans, they might be queer, whatever, but connecting people up, connecting these students up with people already established in the corporate world is really powerful, because that embodies role modeling, it embodies support and mentoring and coaching. And, you know, I do a lot of, I guess, coaching through some of the business work that I do, and I know how transformative that can be. So I think having that mentoring thing, equally, you know, even taking Credit Suisse as an example, I mentored a lot of the board members there. And that's a two-way street of how that positively impacts both sides of that relationship. So I think, you know, those types of schemes, really good. But fundamentally, I love the way that Trans in the City and the work that they do is really empowering individuals to step up, to be more. And, you know, that flip side helps the organisations as well, because it allows them then to foster a much more diverse pipeline of talent. Because
Absolutely.
I think we all know how important that is.
I mean, as an early careers professional, you know that I value diverse talent so much. So yeah, working with companies like Trans in the City and their student and mentoring programs is just phenomenal. What do you think the biggest benefits for the company are? You know, let's face it, companies are business and there's got to be a return of investment. What do you think is the biggest bonus for the companies that invest in programs such as Trans in the City?
They get to work with amazing people like you.
Of course, and you
too. Thank you. Which is honestly a massive big thing. I think you touched on it earlier on. The diverse pipeline of talent is so very important, because quite often organisations can find it very hard conventionally to tap into that new set of talent that perhaps they haven't really addressed before. They might be going to the wrong universities, or perhaps as a brand they're not recognised as an inclusive environment, so people won't generally go to that sector. So the talent pool is really important. I think having staff that feel safe, have that sense of belonging, know that they can be their true authentic self at work is incredibly powerful, because I can guarantee you will have much more attentive and happy and committed staff. And guess what? You will get much more from happy, committed, consented staff. Many of the financial firms that I've worked with have done so much analysis on how much better does a firm that's, you know, diverse and inclusive perform than compared to those that are not. And, you know, and this is creating virtual baskets of different inclusive companies and portfolios. And, you know, it's not just the financial returns, it's the yields, it's the dividends, it's the retention, it's the attrition. Yeah. Diverse firms perform so much better. So I think also it's good for business as well as good for people. I think as a brand, or from a brand perspective, you know, it's amazing for your brand to be seen as inclusive and open-minded and accepting and having a diverse group of people, because generally, maybe some do, but generally people do not want to work in a think tank echo chamber where everyone looks the same and thinks the same and comes up with the same solution. So I think having that diverse perspectives on, I don't know, what's being done, how things should be done, etc. Diverse perspectives comes from a diverse talent of individuals within the firm. So I think that's another one as well.
As you said, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Absolutely.
I've coined this phrase. This is my phrase of the month.
I'm charging from that without saying absolutely. But I think also just being a progressive and innovative firm that is moving with the times is such an important thing. So there's a lot of good things for the business, for the firm, for the staff, and for the individuals that work there, and everyone.
I could talk about this all day. We're not going to, though, because I know you have other things to do and we have some dinner to get, right? But as we wrap up, Pips, what one piece of advice would you give to companies looking to become more inclusive of trans and non-binary people?
I'm going to cheat and not just stick to one, but I will keep them quick, I can promise. I guess first and foremost, thank you all from the bottom of my heart and from the whole community, because anything that you do, everything that you do, really does make a huge difference. You know, even if you look at some of the statistics for suicide and self-harm and all these things, you are helping make the world a better place. And any actions that you do is so powerful. So be proud. I think that's one. Realise that you're not alone. You know, so many other firms have been down this road before and have done similar things. So do not think you have to reinvent the wheel, whether that's your training, your policies, your benefits, your networks, your staff events. It's all been done before. So reach out to firms and groups and organisations that can support and help you in doing that, because I can guarantee you, you do not need to reinvent the wheel as well. And just make a big difference by taking positive steps, because it's so important. It's so powerful, and it will have such a positive impact to your firm, your brand, your staff, everybody. You know, it's definitely a win-win situation. But I think the biggest one, be proud, because you are making a big difference.
Thank you so much, Pip. So I really thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your insights with us today. Your work in advocacy, it sounds so cringe when I say it, but they are inspiring, and you are a role model, and you have to give yourself much more credit for that. We're really grateful to have had this chance to hear from you. If people would like to get in touch, are you comfortable with them doing so on LinkedIn?
Please do.
Wonderful. I mean, we'll find her. She's got thousands and thousands of followers now, so there's no concerns there. And any final closing remarks from you before we finally wrap up?
Another thank you, I think, obviously to you, to the team here, and also to everyone that's listening, because you're obviously stepping up as an ally. You're helping make a difference, and honestly, I cannot express enough the impact that makes. And I quite often, even allies, I quite often find they don't really know or appreciate the massive difference they make. So take that away, reflect on it, ponder on it, but just know you are doing good by being good.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in for this special episode for Genderfluid Visibility Week. Let's all take a step forward in creating more inclusive workspace and supporting our amazing trans and non-binary community. Don't forget to check out the amazing work that's being done by Trans in the City and Humility Hub also. Until next time, take care and stay inclusive.
Thank you.